Good morning. We look today at yesterday and today's combined readings, 2 Chronicles 7 through 12. And as I started reading today's readings in chapter 10, it was talking about King Rehoboam, and I thought, well, what happened to King Solomon? And I remembered, oh yeah, yesterday was Sunday. I didn't talk about this yesterday. But in chapter 7 through 9, the end of chapter 6, Solomon has just finished praying this prayer for all the people and for everyone. And chapter 7 begins with fire coming down from heaven and consuming the burnt offerings and all the offerings, and God filling the temple with his spirit, so much so that the glory of the Lord was so present in the temple that the priests and them, they couldn't even enter because the presence of God was so much there. And then it talks about the enormous offering that King Solomon and all of the people offered to God that way, and it was a 7-day observance, and then on the 8th day, verse 8, chapter 7, at that time Solomon held the festival for 7 days, and all Israel with him, and on the 8th day they held a solemn assembly, and on the 23rd day of the 7th month he sent the people home. So they had been there to consecrate the temple, to welcome God fully into their midst, and God came and filled the temple and was there, very, very evident to the people, and they bowed down and they worshiped. And I skipped over in verse 3 where they said, "The Lord is good, and his steadfast love endures forever." The people know this of God, that he is good, and that his love endures forever. But they forget and they fall away and they don't leave. Same thing as today. We don't always follow God in so many things. But then as we get further in there, the Lord appears to Solomon again and says that, that he will dwell within this temple, and it will be his home, and he will dwell and live within the people. I have chosen this place for myself, he says, as a house of sacrifice. And then it's, when I shut up the heavens and when I do these things, it's a reminder to the people that I am God. It's a reminder to the people that they're sinning and falling away. If, this was God's way of communicating with the masses of the people. Although, he spoke through the prophets in other ways as well. But the Lord blessed Solomon because of Solomon's faithfulness, his wisdom and everything. But verse 19 is but if you turn aside and if you forsake my statutes and my commandments, it's this double-edged sword. It's good if you follow, and it's bad if you don't. And we go through that. And in chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 8 continues on that with talking about Solomon and that. And in chapter 9 we have the appearance of Queen Sheba coming and marveling at Solomon's wisdom and finding that he is even more than she expected. And it talks about Solomon's wealth and grandeur in chapters 10 and or in chapter 9. As we read the end of chapter 9, we come to the end of Solomon's reign. Solomon dies. And in chapter 10 we have King Rehoboam starting. I think that's about as close as I'll get to saying his name. He's one of Solomon's sons, and he doesn't follow Solomon's ways. He doesn't follow the advice of the leaders of the advisors that had been there, and it ends up there's a revolt against him. And as we continue on in chapter 11 and 12, Egypt comes and mounts an attack against King Rehoboam and Israel. And when David and Solomon were king, the power and the might of Israel and the leadership of the Lord for them in battle was so evident to the other nations that there was maybe a relative peace, but not complete peace. But when these other kings and other nations see the Israelites falling away from God, they see this as an opportunity that they might get some revenge against them, or capture some land, or that that Israel is susceptible to being defeated. That there is hope for their army against Israel. And so Egypt attacks Judah, and there's battle, and and it goes on, and it talks about many different things about King Rehoboam, and chapter 12 ends with, it says, the acts of Rehoboam from the first to last, are they not written in these records? And if you search, you might be able to find a little bit more, but it's kind of sketchy in so many different ways and stuff. And then we end chapter 12 as King Rehoboam dies. And I'm going to just kind of close my Bible up for right now, because today is Memorial Day. I posted a picture a little while ago that Cheryl took of, I had my hat on, my chaplain's hat, and I got my shirt and my tie, and I got my poppy on, and it's Memorial Day. And I remember growing up that Memorial Day was always a very important day to my father. My dad was a tail gunner on a B-17. He was based in England. He and his crew flew 35 missions from England over Germany and different places. Some of them were dropping supplies to the underground. Some of them were bombing raids where they were dropping this bomb or that bomb and different things. And Dad kept a little logbook that I and my siblings found in the desk drawer in the office, and we read that. But Dad never talked about the war. But Memorial Day was always a day of very important to Dad, because he had friends that gave their lives in World War II and in Korea and in Vietnam, and one of his Legion member buddies, his son died in Vietnam, and Dad had made a good friend named Michael during his time in the service. And Dad said you didn't make friends with too many members of other crews, because you didn't ever know when they may not come back. And one log in Dad's book, it started out with our altitude was this and that, and basically the only thing in there was Michael didn't come back. And so this was like in 1944, early 1945. And early on in the war, if a plane's crew flew 26 missions, like if you ever seen the Memphis Belle, they were sent home. But later on in the war, you just continued to serve. And so Dad's crew was 35 missions. But as I said, Michael didn't return. And there were no shoots that anyone saw or anything that way. And Mom and Dad started going to bomb group reunions probably in the early 80s. I don't remember when, but at one time he went to the one in Texas. I think it was in Texas. And he and his group were sitting at this table, and all of a sudden Michael and his crew came in. They had all successfully parachuted out, even though no one saw any shoots, and they'd been rescued, picked up by the underground and protected, and made their ways back home again. And Dad had been mourning his friend Michael all those years, and then to find out that he was alive was just a tremendous blessing for Dad that way. But yet Memorial Day is the day that we set aside to remember those who gave their lives in the military. We also call it Decoration Day. We go and I put flowers on my mom's grave and my dad's grave and my sister's graves and my Grandpa and Grandma Christensen's graves, and my cousins had already been there and done my other Grandpa and Grandma and some others. So we decorate the graves of more than just those who died in the service. And as we have a Memorial Day service today, our gun salute will be over the grave of a person who served in the military but did not die in active service, but yet was in the service. So, it's primarily the day that we need to remember and treasure all of those who gave their lives for the freedoms that we have as citizens of the United States of America. And to remember that there are many that are buried in France, Germany, England, scattered around throughout the world, that there are some whose remains have never been, brought back or found, but yet families have holes in their hearts because of this. And so often we see in the United States and in other places of the world that freedom is taken lightly, and it's not. And I think that's one of the things that the members of the American Legion, the VFW, model for us, is that they know firsthand the sacrifice. There are very few people that served active service that don't know someone that died in the service. And for them this is a big day. And for my dad, it always was an important day, a day to observe and to remember. And that's what we do today, is we remember and we give honor. And always